Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann. I'm hoping my volume was a little bit better in this video. I had a few with iffy volume quality, but I did go back to using an external mic. So hopefully this is good. All right. So today I wanted to talk about an amazing nonfiction book that I just read. Quick background is that my brother lives in Alaska. He's lived in Alaska for a few years. So we've been going every year recently to visit him. And so we were just in Alaska earlier this summer. And I picked up in a gift shop this book called Shadows on the Koyukuk, an Alaskan native's life along the river. And it's the story of Sidney Huntington, who related the story of his life to Jim Reardon in 1993. And the result was, or maybe over a period of several years, but in 1993, this book was published. And it's essentially Sidney's autobiography. It really sounds like someone telling you their life and telling you about their love of Alaska and the Alaska wilderness. Sidney was born in 1915. He is half Native Alaskan. His mother was a member of the Athapascan people, specifically the Koyukuk people that live in the Koyukuk River Valley. The Koyukuk is one of the tributaries of the Yukon River. This book has a nice map of the part of Alaska that is relevant to Sidney's life. And then the whole book is just sort of the story of his life. And most of it is focused on his early years in terms of like the detail of everything that happened. And then his sort of adult life is more of just kind of a summary of his adult life with just a few like key memories that are really delved into in detail. It's absolutely fascinating because his life straddled sort of the last generation of people that really grew up sort of in the Alaskan wilderness, like no electricity, getting all of their food from the land. He maintained that lifestyle well into his adulthood, even with a family with many, many children. They were still getting most of their food from the land, from hunting and trapping and fishing, even though at that point he had started to move into a cash economy and have sort of cash jobs that paid in cash. But for his early decades, everything was barter and trade. Right, so I mentioned half, his mother was from the Koyukuk people. His father was a white trapper who had come from Europe and really embraced the Alaskan way of life. And his father and mother were together until his mother's death. And that happens early in the book. So I will say I think it's the second chapter, is incredibly hard to read because Sidney was 5 years old at the time, and his younger brother and younger sister, they were with their mother in their cabin way up in the middle of nowhere. Their father had left. He was a trader, and so he had to go, get supplies every spring and then bring them back way upriver, and then he would trade with all the local people and be a real hub. So he had gone to sort of replenish his supplies. Gone for a very long time, and in the course of that time, their mother died through a freak accident, and Sidney and his younger brother and sister were alone for I think 2 weeks in this, in a cabin by the river before a steamboat went by. And at that time, you would sort of stop for everybody that you saw on the riverbank, and you would trade and catch up with news and everything. And there was nobody. The kids were hiding because they'd been feral for 2 weeks and they were terrified. So the steamboat actually stopped partly because it looked so empty and abandoned, and nobody was there. And so the kids were rescued by the steamboat. The captain and other folks knew who they were and rescued them. So we do get how that really played through Sidney's childhood. But that chapter was really hard to read. So just a little warning there. But this book was incredible. I just really enjoyed it. So highly recommend it. It does say on the back that this is required reading at many schools in Alaska and is recommended reading in many of the colleges and universities as well. So very highly regarded book. So that's sort of my plug and about the book. But I just wanted to read a passage that's only about two pages or so long. But one of the things that I just loved so much about this, I mean, the firsthand history and modern day about sort of the challenges of living in Alaska, I thought was really informative and educated me a lot. But also just the beauty of the natural world of Alaska and the love that Sidney Huntington has for it, and the degree to which he was just completely enmeshed in it is just astounding, and he just told it so beautifully. So I just wanted to read a couple pages. So if you're not interested, of course, go away. But if you want to hear his storytelling, then I would like to just read a passage. So this is chapter 21, Koyukuk Moose. And it's a description of a hunting trip. So, September in the Koyukuk Valley has a special feel. Dark nights have returned, there is less heat to the sun, and at midday tree shadows have noticeably lengthened from those of summer. Nights, brilliant with northern lights, are crisp, and ice forms on the edges of ponds, a forecast of things to come. Yellow, gold, and red leaves splash the forest and hills. Great V's of cranes and geese bound for a warmer land pass over, their musical cries drifting in their wake. It is the time to dig potatoes and use the last of the broccoli and cabbage that still hangs on in the garden. Blueberries, which ripen in the muskegs by the end of August, must be picked and sugared down before the frosts soften them. Crimson cranberries are firm and ripe shortly afterward, ready to put up in baskets or kegs. Firewood must be cut and split. Cabin chinking should be checked for tightness. Dried fish and meat must be stored. Early September is also time to hunt moose, before the rut begins and while the meat is still sweet and mild, yet when it is cold enough so that it won't spoil. One fine mid-September day in the late 1940s, I left our cabin in late afternoon and, alone, poled and paddled a small boat up Hog River. I had planned an evening hunt, hoping to find a bull moose near the river. Moose had moved into the Koyukuk and were becoming a more common part of our diet. Moose are best hunted at dawn and dusk, when they are active. I eased my boat ashore, tied it, and with 30-30 rifle in hand, followed a winding, well-used game trail through the spruce and birch forest beside the river. It was sprinkled with fresh moose tracks. I wore moccasins and soft fabric pants and jacket that made no noise as I eased past trees and through brushy thickets. I ghosted along for half a mile, then climbed to a favorite lookout where I could see a few acres of treeless tundra flats, the edge of a pond, and a few hundred yards along tree-lined Hog River. There I sat on a downed tree, watching, listening, absorbing the sounds, sights, and feelings of the land. I was content and fulfilled, one with the land. I didn't feel as if I owned it. I was simply a part of it, and it was beautiful and wonderful. I have always loved the evening hunt, especially when it is calm and clear. As the sun nears the horizon, a hush descends on the forest and there is an expectancy in the air. Jays, thrushes, chickadees, and other small birds scurry about with occasional calls as they seek their night's shelter. The cool evening air is like wine, and a wool mackinaw and cotton work gloves feel good. Moose may occasionally call. Cows sometimes make a peculiar, high-pitched, bird-like chirrup that carries for miles. Bulls may emit a deep, resonating grunt. Even the sound of water flowing down a steep creek may be heard for hundreds of yards in cool, still air. The shadows deepened. 2 ravens flew over, playing in flight. One folded his wings and rolled upside down, only to catch himself when he had dropped 20 or 30 feet. The other imitated his companion. Ravens are masters of flight and often play in updrafts. This big, intelligent black bird eats anything: mice, carrion, birds' eggs, fish. They live in the Koyukuk country summer and winter. A great horned owl, an old acquaintance who lived somewhere in a nearby stand of spruces, called a deep, hollow hoo-hoo several times. It's a wonderful sound. In my mind's eye, I could see him sitting high among the branches, blinking his big yellow eyes, his round, eared head turning this way and that as he contemplated the coming evening. I saw movement among the spruces by the riverbank. As I watched, a large bull moose quietly walked into full view, perhaps 100 yards away. Something about the forest that evening, the hush, the feel of the crisp air, the growing darkness, the occasional sounds of birds, the chirring of a red squirrel, gave the evening a magic feel that seemed more intense than any other time I could remember. The bull's yellow-gold antlers were clean, with no velvet hanging from them, and they projected a ghostly luminosity in the twilight. He stopped and stood quietly, listening and looking. He was what I had come for, and he was in easy rifle range. Yet I waited. Perhaps he would move closer. A careful hunter always likes his prey close. If the first shot doesn't down the animal, it is easier to get a second shot into it with the animal near. The moose walked toward me, following the trail. If he continued, he would walk so close I could not possibly miss him. Again he stopped. He wasn't alarmed. He had probably just left his daytime bed and, like a man awakening in the morning, he was stretching his muscles and his mind, readying himself for the evening feed. He was in no hurry. First, he wanted to know what was going on around him. He was watching, listening, and scenting the air to see who or what was near. I remained motionless on my downed log, eyes glued to the bull. He was a fine, big, fat, mature animal. His antlers spread more than 5 feet, and he stood a full 6 feet at the shoulders. In the fading light, he looked almost black. As he moved toward me, his body was occasionally silhouetted against the bright and calm water of Hog River. I prefer to take a small bull for winter meat, for they are easier to handle than a huge old bull. Also, sometimes the meat of an old bull is tough. He continued his unhurried way toward me, and I mentally prepared myself for what was to come. A cartridge was in the chamber of the rifle, and it was loaded with 170 grains of lead. The tubular magazine was filled with 4 more cartridges, giving me 5 shots. To fire the first, likely the only one I would need, as I raised the rifle to my shoulder, I would draw the hammer back into the cocked position with my right thumb. To prevent a click that would alarm the moose, I would hold the trigger back. Once the hammer was back, I would release the trigger, then the hammer, and the rifle would remain cocked, ready to fire. I would aim at the bull's chest, the deepest part of his body. The bullet would go through his lungs, or if I shot a little lower, I could hit his heart. A quick, merciful, and sure death for the hunted is the goal of every experienced hunter. If my bullet flew true, my big bull would stagger momentarily, then he would stand head down, provided I remained perfectly still and he didn't see or smell me. After another half a minute to a minute, he would collapse dead, drowned in his own blood. This bull would drop within 100 feet of the river. It would be an easy job to carry the meat to my boat. In other years, when moose were scarcer, I had killed them so far from a river that I didn't even try to pack the meat. Instead, I had wrapped it in canvas to protect it from ravens and jays, and hung it high in a tree to retrieve it with a dog team after snow came. This moose would pose no such problem. The bull was within 25 feet. It was time for me to shoot. But the magic of the moment, the beauty of the surroundings, and the sheer magnificence of that great, alert but relaxed bull compelled me to hold my fire. Also, I wondered, did I want this big old animal? Would his meat be tender? As I sat, knowing he was mine, all I needed to do was to raise the rifle and pull the trigger. He stopped, swung his head about, and, for long moments, seemed to look straight at me. I remained frozen. Calmly, he swung his head back and silently and alertly moved on down the trail into the trees and out of sight. I didn't even lift my rifle. I'm not sure whether I chose not to shoot because he and the magical evening had given me so much pleasure, or because he was a bigger animal than I wanted. A few days later, I killed another smaller bull, which provided us with our winter's meat. My vivid memory of that big bull still lingers, and in my mind at least, he still roams that wild trail on Hog River. So that's just a little taste of the type of writing in this book. I just found it absolutely beautiful storytelling, just very down to earth, really feels like somebody just kind of talking to you. And I just really loved, as I mentioned, the appreciation for the wildlife and the natural world that Sidney Huntington has, and the clearly the great attention that he paid to everything around him, which you have to do when your survival is dependent on all the little details of your surroundings, how to kill a moose most effectively, but just the respect and the attention that he has for everything in the natural world, I found really inspiring. So I hope that more non-Alaskans will pick up this book, because it was a really beautiful, sometimes heartbreaking tale of the change that happened very rapidly in Alaska from in the lifetime of Sidney Huntington, which was 1915 until the early 90s when this book was written. He actually passed away in 2015 at the age of 100. So that's what I have today. And I hope you're all enjoying whatever you're reading, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.